10 things to know before you get hired. The competency line. Now, there's this perception that our bosses, our leaders, executives are very good at what they do because they are leaders and executives. That's not necessarily the case. They are certainly very good at what you do because they did it for much longer and then got promoted. That doesn't mean they're very good at what they do. Now, if you take a standard linear career path, say of a CFO, a chief financial officer, they entered the company and they were an associate or graduate associate, and they did their finance stuff, they did their accounting, got their qualifications, and they did financial forecasting, accounting and stuff for years. Then they became analysts, and they were doing larger projects, and they were leading, there were certainly people who were at the front of their teams. Then they got promoted to managers, and all of a sudden they are leading teams of analysts, setting people's targets, making sure they're motivated, that they're doing things on time, managing leaves and so on and so forth. Then they become heads of certain departments, risk or whatever it is. All of a sudden they are mandated by the people above them to do things like, right, what are the latest tools in financial analysis or risk or whatever? We need to implement them. You need to find out what your competitors are doing, and you need to form a strategy for your team. Then you need to make sure that your team are trained properly. All of a sudden you begin to hear about these things called recruitment, and HR start educating you in these things called attrition and motivation and stuff, and they take you through some sort of learning and development saying this is what it means to lead a team. And you go up, you become the director, and all of a sudden you're this chief financial officer, and it's been absolutely ages since you did hardcore analysis, right? Now your main job is to fight it out with people on the C-suite for the budget of the company. Hey, we need this new technology to do X, Y, and Z, or we need to hire a new analyst, or whatever it is, right? But then the CIO is saying, hey, we need to get this system in for you, and the Chief Information Security Officer is saying, hey, we've had all these cyber attacks and we need budget for this. And someone else is, that's what your job is, to fight for the budget of your vertical, to deal with HR. Hey, we're losing more people than we're hiring. Why aren't our people motivated? Then there's the forecasting. What are our competitors doing? It's been so long since you actually did just hardcore analysis. And the question is, are you good at what you do? Now, we'll talk about this later on in this series, something called the Peters Principle. But because people get promoted, their KPIs are just far more vague, and their measurements or the metrics of success are far more dependent on politics. Can they become allies with other people on the C-suite? They need to start making a certain type of impression. All of a sudden there's this thing called diversity and inclusion, another part of this series. Where do I stand in relation to my peers and with the market in terms of leadership, right? How am I doing on my online presence and my LinkedIn and so on and so forth? So when you go to them as an analyst or whatever your position is and say, hey, I've got a problem, and they solve that problem very quickly, it's because they've done it very well. The reason why I'm throwing a bit of skepticism into the competency of leaders is because it affects certain performance metrics which HR will tell their leaders about. For example, I think the Elderman report said, this is quite a few years now, but it's a huge statistic, and it wouldn't have changed overnight, that 82% of people don't trust what their bosses tell them, and that 60% of employees, now this is the Harvard Business Review, this is a little bit more recently, so that 60% of employees don't know what success in their role looks like. And one of the main causes of this is that many leaders don't follow that linear track of progression. Many people go straight into leadership. They do it because, say, it's part of the family business, fine. They have a fast track to leadership because, say, they've done an MBA course, and that sort of single them out among their peers in terms of being promoted. They have, got more strategy and thinking about that sort of stuff. and maybe they were just good at playing that game of promotions and so on. So it means that when people not everyone who gets to the top was actually very good at what they did to start off with. Not to mention other social structures. You know, if you come from a certain demographic or been to a certain type of uni or something like that, people will look more kindly on you in terms of, you know, your very starting position in life, in terms of your career, let alone climbing the ladder throughout an organization. There's so many things that work for you, not to mention perception bias when it comes to diversity and inclusion. Non-diverse people just are looked more kindly upon. So that means that many times you wouldn't get people who were actually very good at what they did in order to get promoted. They take many things for granted, which is why you have these phenomena about poor trust or not knowing what, many people thinking that their bosses don't actually know what success in their own job looks like. That's an important thing for you to know before you get your next job. This is preparing you for certain types of frustrations, right? You will very often find bosses that don't necessarily know what they're doing, and you'll feel it. Many of them will know what you're doing and they will call it good or bad. You'll have very clear KPIs, but you will get the sense that they don't know what they're doing, and it's something that you should come to expect. Catch you next time.